The speaker, Dr. Chen, previous to my speech, raised some very important points, and I agree with a number of things, not everything he said, but a number of things. As Clay said, I'm currently co-editing a book on Chinese soft power, and I have to thank the authors of the chapter on Taiwan in that book, Ju Yun Han and Dalton Lin, because reading their chapter was very helpful to me for this presentation. So let me start. Let's see. Okay. Sorry to put so much on the screen, but this way I don't have to have any notes. But there are basically, I have 3 slides of conclusions. And as Clay says, I do work on film, and so there'll be some things on film coming up later. But let me start with, I think most people know the logic of soft power. Soft power being the attraction through non-coercive elements. Coercive elements like military force, economic sanctions, and so on. The attraction through non-coercive elements to try and get another country to behave in a way that you would like them to behave. And the logic of soft power normally begins with building up the attraction of a country's soft power resources, whether it's culture, foreign policy, the type of government you have, universal values, and so on. You start building up the attraction of your country, and then it should lead to positive responses from the target country. The problem with China's mainland, China, whatever you want to call it, China's soft power approach turns the logic upside down because you have a political precondition, the one China principle. You start with that. That's the basis from Beijing's point of view of peaceful development of cross-strait relations. China demands a positive soft power response from Taiwan, committing to Beijing's agenda of unification before the soft power resources build up their attraction. So you have basically a blurring of the line between hard power and soft power, or attraction and coercion. As the previous speaker said, China is using both carrots, economic enticements, and sticks, banning those who don't accept the preconditions, like Ing-wen, for example. It also, I could have put more on this slide, but I already filled up the page, so I had to stop at this one. But anyone who accepts China's preconditions looks like they're favoring the mainland's interests over Taiwan's interests, and that's counterproductive to soft power development. So from the very beginning, China cannot succeed in that soft power initiative. But I also agree with the previous speaker that China's main goal is not winning the hearts and minds. They have other higher goals. Okay, the second slide. Now, the Ma administration's approach to cross-strait relations was economics first, politics later. And so you had 23 cross-strait agreements signed. The hope was, the KMT's hope, Ma's hope, was this would lead to Taiwan's greater economic integration with the rest of the world, including free trade agreements with other countries, more international space. But China still restricted, or Beijing, if you like, still restricted Taiwan's international space and began pressing for negotiations on political issues in the second part of Ma's 8-year term, reasoning that Taiwan's external legitimacy would be strengthened by this greater economic integration, by this international space, and that Taiwan would, in effect, be in a better position to resist the mainland's political agenda. So economics was used as a carrot to bring a political integration of some sort. Now, when you had the Sunflower Movement in March 2014, this was a reaction to the perceived use of economic incentives to promote China's political, or Beijing's political agenda. It not only prevented the ratification of the Service Trade Agreement, but virtually ended China's attempts, or Beijing's attempts, at soft power promotion during the Ma term of office. Now, the third thing, I begin to get into a little more of what I work on, which is more film industry related, and I'm watching the time, Clay, so. I have 15 slides, by the way. This is number 3. Okay.
Actually, you have 15 minutes.
Okay. They're not all this complicated. Okay. I've got 7 points here in terms of the basic conclusions. If you look at things like culture and film, this is more generally subject, I should read my own screen here, it's easier, more generally subject to the broader relationship, and again, subject to the one China principle. So you're going to have disputes and humiliation, some of which I'll talk about as I go on, inevitable when it comes to cultural issues. As I've said, the mainland's main attraction to Taiwan is economic. It's not cultural. As I've said, the Ma government downplayed the dispute since it needed good relations with the mainland so economic benefits would continue to flow. The DPP, on the other hand, highlights the disputes with China, turning, especially in the Ma years, turning them into issues of Taiwanese identity, something I'll also talk about if I have time. Fourth point here, current strategy of Beijing is to isolate, as everybody knows, the Tsai government and punish those who are perceived as independence advocates and offering benefits of access to the vast Chinese market to those who are favored. Incentives and disincentives, mostly economic. Fifth point, it's hard for Beijing to succeed in film because Taiwan has maintained a very strict film quota, admitting only 10 mainland films a year by lottery. There was talk some years ago of increasing that to 15. It didn't really happen. There was talk about having additional art films from China coming in, but even if that were approved, most of those art films are banned. The good ones are banned in China anyway, so that doesn't really help. Point 6, very important, I think, in the relationship is the role of social media in China, the so-called Internet Water Army, Wang Luo, Shui Jun, very important. This has been counterproductive to China's development of soft power in Taiwan. I'll give some examples. Last point on this slide, Cape number 7, this Haijiao Qihao. This was a breakthrough. The first Taiwan film released in the mainland in 17 years made 36 million Chinese yuan, renminbi. It opened the door for other films from Taiwan. So during Ma's term in office, Taiwan films did quite well in China. During the first weeks of 2012, for example, 3 Taiwan mainland co-productions took 10% of the box office, about 40 million US dollars. That kind of success is now quite rare. Now, recently, as of March this year, the mainland has again opened the door to Taiwan films in terms of policy initiatives. They come up with 31 new policy initiatives from the China's Taiwan Affairs Office, which range from educational training and other kinds of issues. 3 of the 31 deal with film and TV. So quota restrictions on the import of Taiwanese movies and TV shows, which supposedly had been done earlier. They removed the limits on the number of shows Taiwanese talent can appear in. They eased the co-production rules, and so on. But I think I put this in red because it's very important. The spokesperson from the Taiwan Affairs Office said, Taiwanese compatriots can share in the opportunities arising from China's economic development. That's their basic carrot. That's their basic soft power initiative. The same thing they do in Tibet, the same thing they do in Xinjiang. We don't want your culture. We don't care about your culture unless it's somehow damaging to us. But we're going to show you how we can develop your region. That's basically the message. Now, January 2013, China had previously announced it would abolish import quotas, but it didn't really make any difference. And even with abolishing import quotas, getting approval from the censors in China is certainly not guaranteed, and it certainly does not favor Taiwan's very active and very good art house sector for films, but it's for uncontroversial mainstream commercial movies. Now, if you look at some of the problems China has, look at some of the recent headlines. This is from late March 2018. China won't let in movies with Taiwanese actors who support independence for the island. And well, how do you know someone supports independence? Very broadly conceived. For example, the example I have here is Changli Kai-ke, Missing Johnny, scheduled for an April release, won't be allowed in mainland cinemas after reports circulate on Chinese social media that the lead actor, Lawrence Ko, has ties to a party that supports independence. Second, Taiwan actor Lian Dai was dropped from the Chinese film No Other Love over politics. Now, that film was directed by Zhao Wei, a leading Chinese actress, and funded by Alibaba. Third, Zhang Zhen, a Taiwan actor on the Cannes Film Festival jury, but he's called Chinese, prompting Taiwan to request a correction. So the One China principle basically transcends everything else, including soft power initiatives. If you look at the top grossing films in Taiwan of all time, you find the first 10 films are all Hollywood films. The second 10 films, you have 2 films from Taiwan. Escape Number 7 and Side of the Club Ballet. Only 2 films from Taiwan. So Hollywood makes 90% or more of the box office. Sometimes it can go down to 85%, but it's mostly Hollywood films in Taiwan. So mainland China has no real chance in that regard. Now, again, I'm conscious of the time, Clay. 5? Okay, good. Something most people would know, identity issues. Changes in Taiwanese Chinese identity. This goes through June 2018 from the Zhengzhou Daxue, the political university. What's interesting there, among other things, is that Taiwanese identity went up during the Ma years when the KMT was in control, but identification as solely Taiwanese and not Chinese and Taiwanese has gone down a bit in the Tsai Ing-wen years. And I think there are obvious reasons, if I had time to talk about that, that with Tsai Ing-wen and DPP in power, there's no reason to promote your Taiwanese identity. It's obvious. But when Ma is pushing for better relations with the mainland, signing all these deals, well, you want to push back and say, okay, we're Taiwanese, not even Chinese. Now this one, I'm sorry, I didn't want to take the time to try and translate in English and redo the slide, but this is from the Mainland Affairs Council, ROC. People's views on the speed of cross-strait relations. And again, it's kind of interesting if you look at the numbers to see that under Tsai Ing-wen, there's been a big jump in those people who think that the relationship, the cross-strait relationship, is moving too slow. Whereas in the Ma years, they thought it was moving too fast. This is in some ways common sense. And Beijing is looking at this and saying, okay, this is something that's good for us. They're critical of Tsai Ing-wen. Maybe we can push her even more. Now, looking at specific kind of films, one of the last films that did really well in China from Taiwan was Our Times. Okay. Everybody can read that, no reason for me to say it. Anyway, that became the highest grossing Taiwanese film of all time in mainland China. Now, one reason was it came less than 2 weeks after the November 7th meeting between Xi Jinping and Ma Ying-jeou, widely covered on both sides of the strait. Film fans online praised the film, very glowing comments about the film. So the political situation helped to determine it's a good film. But even then, you see the internet, the social media, Huang An, who's been a gadfly in many ways for anybody he perceives as not supporting the PRC, a Taiwanese singer, he claimed that an investor and the lead actor had ties to the Taiwan independence movement, although those claims were quickly discredited by anybody who knows anything about what's going on in Taiwan. But before they were discredited, again, the internet water army flooded social media with inflammatory remarks, nationalist rhetoric, calls to boycott the film, and posting of 1-star ratings on Douban and other websites before the actual moviegoers pushed the rating up. The point is that there are people in mainland China, including people from Taiwan, who are looking very, very, just as in the United States you have the, 2 minutes. Just in the United States you have these conservatives that are looking to find James Gunn from Guardians of the Galaxy, anything he's done wrong in the past because he's too liberal, and get rid of him. The same thing is going on in mainland China. I could talk about the Zhou Ziyu's case, where most people are familiar with, a poor 16-year-old girl in a Korean group. She waved the Taiwan flag in a video, which is okay in some ways in terms of the 1992 consensus, but again, she was vilified and had to make a very public apology with 3 million views on YouTube. Very, very beneficial for Tsai Ing-wen's chances during the election, actually. It really helped her. She said that as a Chinese person, my improper words and behavior during my activities abroad hurt my company because our company put tremendous pressure on her, the Korean company, to do this. And it backfired. It backfired. Vivian Hsu, of course, there was a big quarrel in 2010 at Tokyo International Film Festival over the name. that should be used. Never before had that been a problem, but Zhang Ping, the head of the mainland delegation, said you have to have Taiwan, China, or Chinese Taipei, the only acceptable names, otherwise he would boycott the festival. And his response again was, Zhang Ping's response is, don't you want to sell your films in the mainland? Aren't you all Chinese? He asked the Taiwanese performers. 1 minute, okay, I have one slide. The last slide, I believe that's the last slide. Anyway, it will be the last slide, whether it is or not. But the reporting in China about the 2010 episode, because Ma Ying-jeou was still in office, blamed Japan, not Taiwan. They said, it has nothing to do with our Taiwanese compatriots. It is the fault of the Tokyo organizers, even though they were simply doing the same thing they'd done every year, because they were still trying to have a good relationship with Taiwan under Ma Ying-jeou. If this situation happened now, they would clearly blame the DPP and the Tsai government. So anyway, thank you very much.